not share too much more of that with you. Really saying, oh look, here comes somebody. Let's see. See if I can guess who in the hell that is. Don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me. Shelby. No?
Nope.
Huh?
Nope.
Okay, then PC.
Kelsey.
Kelsey. There's nobody named Kelsey in this class. Okay, I guess there is now. Huh? Okay. You're on 3. So the exam will be Wednesday. We'll finish up Butte Pro on Monday. And I apologize for not bringing food in today, but that, I don't do it every day. I really meant to bring in a cake today, but I'm getting a little weak in my old age. I couldn't carry it all the way up the stairs, so sorry, that's just the way it is. What I'm going to do today is talk about 2 of the valid argument forms that we have. Actually, of the 4 argument forms that we had that were valid, and there only were 2. And so I'll talk about those 2 forms, but also show you how to use them in applying certain kinds of logical tests. And these are very commonly used logical tests that you will find that even though they have sort of strange names, not Latin names, but strange names, the way of reasoning that they sort of underscore is in fact a way of reasoning you probably do, and you have even observed it being done. So I think it'll be a useful thing to be able to know. So let me find this compulsive about that for some reason. Temptation to string myself up might be too much. These are called necessary and sufficient conditions. By conditions, it's meant, you might say, criteria. What makes it, what is the test we might offer to say that a particular thing is necessary to the existence of something else? Well, we'll teach you, I'll do these separately, necessary conditions and sufficient conditions, because necessary conditions use one form of, one valid argument form, and sufficient conditions uses a different form, so I have to attach them separately. In addition, they really work toward discovering or underwriting or establishing 2 different things. With necessary conditions, it always is about composites of some sort, composite entities that have several parts, and it sort of asks the question of many possible parts, which parts of this entity are crucial. Without them, without any one of them, the entity would cease to exist, and which ones are peripheral. That if you take them away, nothing really happens that's significant. Because that happens sometimes. You get maybe a composite in which you have a whole lot of things around you. You don't know which parts are, let's say, crucial and which parts are peripheral.
So with that, you're talking about like arguments that have several premises, and like you can swipe out some of them that aren't even necessary.
Not as much that, but it could be that. We could eventually sort of establish it as a series of premises of which ones we can eliminate and still have the argument work. That'd be sort of one way of looking at it. But we're going to do it in a slightly different way, and I'm going to do it in a much more informal way. But I think it'll work. Because there are several things which are composites which in which you can't be sure unless you put the composite or put the individual parts to a test, whether they're crucial or whether they're unimportant. And that's what a necessary condition is. A necessary condition is something that if you remove it, you sort of utterly destroy the composite of which it is a part. And so we're going to be able to find a way to test composites to see of those things which appear to be composites of the whole, are they necessary or are they just unnecessary when it comes right down to it. So that's what we'll do. And in order to do that, like I said, we'll start with necessary conditions first. I think the best way to illustrate this is to illustrate it from part of my past, a very distant past. This is back my ancestors. We can trace, my family can trace our ancestors in Philadelphia. I was born in Philadelphia. Philadelphia was sort of a home base for me. We can trace our ancestors back, my family, to about 10 million years ago. And to my great-great-great-grandfather, several times removed, Og Loudon. Og was quite a remarkable person. Hadn't learned to walk erect yet from what we understand. But even when he was sort of dragging his knuckles on the ground, Og was a brilliant man. And so I want to tell you a little bit about Og, because not only was he a brilliant man, he really helped understand what necessary conditions are. He sort of invented the whole logical process. And so it's no, I was predestined to teach philosophy because of Og back there 10 million years ago. It's just a natural part of the lineage. What Og did there in Philadelphia was, first of all, the story gets out, he invented fire. He did not invent fire. He gets falsely credited for that. He didn't invent fire. But he invented a way to essentially prove what fire consisted of logically. So that was almost as important. It was a guy down the street who invented fire, frankly. And it was a lucky accident. The guy was nowhere near as smart as Og. That's the way it is sometimes. You don't really get the credit. Because he developed a logical a way of understanding fire where that guy just happened to get lucky and hit some flint and steel together. So, not that there was steel in those days, but we're going. Needless to say, this story is somewhat apocryphal. That's not, by the way, a fancy word for bullshit. It's merely meant to say that this, the story is used more for example than something to look at my family tree. So let's move on. Necessary. What was he trying to do? Well, Og said, fire. Every time there's fire, every time a fire starts, every time a fire is around, I noticed 4 things are always there. And so he wanted to say, are these 4 things necessary for the existence of fire, or are they not? And can we find a way to test them? And he said, well, first of all, what are those 4 things again? And so he didn't really make a list because he didn't speak, but he knew it was one. Yeah, something had to burn up when there's fire, so it has to be fuel, or what he called and every time a fire starts, something has to start it. Some sort of ignition. Or bleep. So we have bleep and bleep. According to Og, of course, who was the most articulate one of the family, I was ashamed to say, wow, Amanda. And this is one of his most brilliant things. He recognized that you can't possibly have fire without some air contributing to an environment. He didn't know it was oxygen at the time, but still, he knew there was, we'll call it oxygen, but we know what it is. But, Og would have, given him a few more million years, he would have discovered oxygen too. So anyway, I said there were 4, because, he lived in Philadelphia, he said, every time there's fire, you know what else there is around? Always there. Cheesesteaks. Never saw a fire without cheesesteaks in Philadelphia. So, stay with me on this, huh? It's brilliant. So anyway, cheesesteaks too. Never saw a fire without cheesesteaks. So he has to say, how are we going to test it? How are we going to test whether something is a necessary condition? And he logically worked out a little formula, which it was so good, we'll give it a different color. Green formula. He invented symbolic logic too, but he really didn't get a lot of credit for that. He said, if there's a fire, then there's, fuel or whatever it's going to be. If you take away the fuel, theory goes, you should end up taking away the fire. And you can see this is nothing more than Morse tolerance, but it is a use of Morse tolerance, determining through this procedure whether something is a necessary condition or not. You know, if there's fire, there is this necessary condition. Remove the necessary condition, the theory goes, if it's a necessary condition, it will extinguish the fire, or remove the fire, or make the fire impossible. The fire will not exist. Alias.
So you're saying if there's fuel, there's fire, if there's not fire, if there's no fuel, is that what you're saying on this with these right here?
No.
What are the premises and the consequence then? I missed that.
Hmm?
What are P and Q again?
What are the premises?
Yeah, just which one's there?
The premises are, you know, there is fire, there is X ingredient necessary.
Okay.
Something like, yes,
So
a
now we're
very
taking
simple
away
sort
the
of.
fuel. So now we're taking away the fuel, because fuel is
Taking away the
fuel.
fuel, yes.
Okay.
If we take away the fuel, do you think we'll take away the fire?
No, we took away the cheese stick.
Yeah, I mean, if all you got is air and spark, and nothing to burn, you don't have a fire. All you have is a windy spark. So, this is what came up with as a way of testing whether or not a condition is necessary or not. And so, he goes through it. Let's do this, you know, if fire, then fuel. No fire, I mean, no fuel, no fire. Boom. So, he has proven, yes, fuel, necessary condition. He says, okay, let's try with ignition. If fire, then ignition. No ignition. You know, you stand around, you keep looking at that log, and you say, well, let's go. Nothing happens. No ignition, no fire. Bingo! Well, now how about oxygen? Well, luckily, like most Loudons, he could suck the oxygen out of a room. And luckily he did, just for the purpose of doing necessary conditions. He says, okay, if fire, then air, no air, no fire. And also no odd, but luckily he got out in time. Or else, you know, the world would have, you know, been well behind what it is now. So we have found oxygen, necessary condition. Well, let's test the cheesesteaks then, okay? If fire, then cheesesteaks. Take out the cheesesteaks. Oh, dang, still got the fire.
A useless fire.
This then proves, through modus tollens, cheesesteaks are not a necessary condition for fire. And just by using this valid form of reasoning and this particular kind of a test set up by, again, my predecessor, Ogg, we can take any kind of composite entity, and as long as the composite entity permits us to sort of take the individual constituent parts out and test them individually, then we can in turn find out whether any given part is necessary or whether it is not necessary. So that's one use of a particular logical form. In this case, it's modus tollens. One use of this particular logical form to apply it to a test. And honestly, this is something of what Socrates is doing in Euthyphro. He is asking Euthyphro for, what you might say a necessary condition for something being piety. And Euthyphro is trying to give examples, love by the gods, or something like that. And Socrates is trying to, in some sense, criticize or at least give a test to each constituent part to see if it really does belong in the definition of piety, or if it needs not to belong in the definition of piety. So, in something of a loose but allied way, what Socrates is doing is looking for a necessary condition for that particular thing. And that's sort of that's something of a scientific way of reasoning as well. If you were trying to understand something more clearly, all you know is that you have the entity, but you don't know how many parts of it are crucial for its existence. This is the way it goes. So, necessary condition. One of the two things we're going to look at tonight having to do with applications of the valid logical forms that we had before. Well, let's do sufficient conditions then. Sufficient conditions are different in this way. It's actually sufficient conditions tend to be more, not more, but tend to be sort of causal related. Often, let's say more talk about sufficient conditions comes in causal reasoning than in any other kind of reasoning. But it still can be applied elsewhere. But causal reasoning is pretty much what it is. And sufficient conditions ask this question, or let's say the test for sufficient conditions attempts to answer this question, and the question is there some cause or some condition that alone is sufficient to produce this effect, whatever the effect is, whatever the phenomenon is. If we can understand that something occurs, but it may come from a variety of causes, we have to ask what kind of causes actually can be shown to produce the effect and what kind of causes cannot produce the effect. And anything which is capable of producing the effect, anything alone, any condition or any cause or any circumstance that is capable of producing the effect alone is called a sufficient condition, because it alone is sufficient to bring about the effect. That's why I said it's usually causal reasoning. It's not only, but usually. And I'm going to sort of stick with causal reasoning as the model here. So let's see, what do we do? Oh, I know, we'll have an example. Since Amanda came in late, people will come in late, get made examples of, and so we use Amanda as an example because this is sort of the question, why was Amanda late? So let's see if we can do some sufficient conditions for trying to understand why Amanda is late. Why she was late today. Now the form we use, the logical form we use to do this is, you can probably guess there's only one other valid form, modus ponens. P then Q, P therefore Q. Now, how this works for a sufficient condition, let's stand up it to be, P is going to be some cause, and that's what we're going to be testing. And Q is going to be late for school. And so we have, if this happens, if P happens, whatever cause, we're going to test various causes to see if there are sufficient conditions. And if we can, and this is more sort of an empirical thing, we really do have to sort of test them. It's not something we can come up with sort of categorically, except for a few. And so we'll bring a few out. Let's see. How about hangnail? A hand nail. Maybe it was a hand nail. A hand nail. A hangnail on the hand. Would be a hand nail. Hangnail. If hangnail been late for school, hangnail, but can anyone really believe that a hangnail alone would be sufficient? Remember, the word sufficient is very important. To cause someone to be late for school, unless they were exceptionally either narcissistic or something, that, oh, I can't go to school, I've got a hangnail. I don't think Amanda is that kind of a person, so therefore, we can see that not any excuse will do. Not any kind of a causal reasoning will do. And by having sort of a template up there, the modus ponens template, we can see that if we're going to make the claim that a hangnail is sufficient for being late for school, then nobody's ever going to show up again. I mean, it's just there's never going to be any more attendance, no matter what my policy is. So that probably wouldn't work. But let's see, late for school. Maybe run out of gas. Gas prices are going up again. If you run out of gas on the way to school, that seems like a sufficient reason to say, yeah, late for school. I mean, late, about 20 minutes late, sure, that could happen. So when we put that in, we can say, if you run out of gas and you're late for school, she did run out of gas, so we can test it. We can sort of, siphon our gas tanks next week and see if, in fact, if she runs out of gas, I think it'll probably happen. All of these you can just put test if there seems to be any doubt. I think, there's hangnail's a no-brainer that it probably can't be a sufficient condition. Run out of gas, that's possible. And other things like, the car broke down, that kind of thing, sure. That would be, maybe, could have just been in Dirty Don's and was so excited by all the bargains there that just lost track of time. I think we lost track of time. I'll just call it lost time. And you can probably say, yeah, that's a possibility. I'm not sure it would be. Only for me. with being lost in Dirty Don's, caused me to miss some sort of appointment. Maybe, she went home and, in the afternoon, and maybe she had a quickie. And so, depending on how quick it was, then we could have another reason why perhaps Amanda was late to class. So we can set up, if you want to, we can set up a test, put cameras in our bedroom or something like that. And maybe even sell the video to some website or another. But the important thing is you need to be able to set up testable hypotheses. Let's say. The hypothesis that this causes this effect. Therefore, let's test this by messing with the car, setting up the cameras, whatever it can be, and then we will have a way of using modus ponens and our own ingenuity and maybe our prurient interest to try to see whether, in fact, through modus ponens, remember, this is not meant to be titillating. This is meant to be a pure and, I think, serious logical attempt to show how an important element of reasoning can take place within the context of foolishness. So anyway, we can probably think of a lot of other sufficient conditions. We can probably think of a lot of other conditions that wouldn't be sufficient. And that's just a way of saying, here's a list of things that probably can alibi being late for school. I didn't ask Amanda why she was late. I don't want to hear her alibi, frankly. But anyway.
Those reasons.
It was one of those. Can we guess which one?
No.
Can we vote for which one? Which one we hope it was? So here we have a way of using modus ponens as a manner of looking at causal reasoning and say, all right, we don't accept just any cause. Then how do we weed out the causes? We weed out the causes based upon their probability and based upon this kind of reasoning with modus ponens. Is it likely that this cause could produce this effect? Let's test the cause and then see if the effect occurs. If the effect does not occur, then we have weeded out one possible sufficient condition. And just another use of logic, another thing we can use some of the standard forms for. We will see the standard forms further as we move on through the Plato, and also to a certain extent in Descartes, less so in Machiavelli. This really ends the logic portion of this little lesson here. What we have next is just working through the rest of Euthyphro. What I want to do, look here, we're at about 10:01 or so. And we actually don't have, we're actually through about 2/3 of that. And the final 1/3 honestly won't take much time at all. Let's assume we are. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to say we're through for the night. And we'll do all of Euthyphro. We can finish all of Euthyphro next time on Monday in actually less than an hour and 15 minutes. So I'd rather have us do it all next time. And the main reason for that is I want to cover the continuity that happens between love by the gods is pious, or pious because it's love by the gods, all the way through the end. There's an interesting continuity that if we do it all in one sitting, I think you'll be able to understand it a little better. So I'm hoping that'll rather work. But for me, I think this is enough for tonight. If you don't mind leaving early. If you do mind leaving early, you can sit here, or we can just join hands and sing Kumbaya.
Talk about more reason like that.
Well,